Good afternoon, folks. My name is Catherine Johnston, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for PATH Employment Services. Thank you for joining us today for our Let's Talk Career series. For those of you new to watching this series, just tuning in or watching it in the future, just to let you know that the reason for these conversations is to give information for folks out there that are considering getting into certain careers, or maybe they're thinking of a career change from their present one they're in. And each one of our guests shares their unique career journey with us. Sometimes there's challenges and accomplishments, and sometimes even some helpful tips for those thinking of getting into certain careers. So today I'd like to introduce our guest, Kevin McNally. Welcome, Kevin, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
I say me, I don't know if it's an us. We'll see how many people are watching, but there's always more later.
Exactly.
How are you doing today?
Nothing on the internet's forever. I'm very good, thank you. And thanks for inviting me for this. It's
no problem.
like I was mentioning, my first time on Facebook Live, so we'll see
That's
how
interesting.
It goes.
I've done it a few times, so I mean, you don't notice a difference until you look at it later. So. So I guess I'll start with a bit of an icebreaker that I usually ask most of our guests about your first job.
Sure.
What was your first job, or your first job? Yep.
Sorry, we got a bit of lag here, but no, my very first job was So I grew up across the street from a strawberry farm, Buttricks on 8th Concession.
Oh, nice.
And so my first job was actually picking strawberries for them. They would have, young kids of the neighborhood come in and pick from their patches that weren't open to the public for pick your own. And we were paid per flat that we picked. And so I got pretty good at picking strawberries and had to help my cousin who's colorblind, red-green colorblind, and being a strawberry picker. It's not a great combination. So we would high grade and quality control his flats to pull out all the green ones.
Okay.
That was the first one for Mr. Botwick. It was good fun.
Yeah. What would you say that taught you? Anything that you took away from that very first job?
Nothing too serious, I guess. Just sort of the value of time and work. And we were pretty young at the time, and it rolled into eventually driving tractors for them. So,
oh wow!
I guess it's just sort of the classic driving the people around for the youth. Just the classic sort of youth employment, really. But it was good.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that in the past too. Strawberry picking. It didn't last very well in the heat.
No, it's not fun. We would do early mornings, I think. Just the mornings we would do it. But now I'm a terror in the strawberry picking with my daughter, because my daughter just goes along and hydrates the big ones when we go strawberry picking, and I'm like, no, you have to get every single one. So my wife says, stop it, doesn't matter anymore.
So what about your current job? What kind of a job are you in now?
Sure. So I'm currently working at a engineering consulting firm it's based out of Toronto. And I work in their project management group. So I think, how does one get to there from picking strawberries in the field might be a question. And so I went to school in mechanical engineering. I went to UBC out in Vancouver and graduated 2006, and moved back to Ontario because jobs in Vancouver at the time weren't really ones that I was interested in. And so I moved back to Ontario and then worked for a little while at an architecture firm, and then I moved to Montreal and got a job at a multinational construction company, really, called Bechtel. And that was a bit interesting how I got that job. I was not working, and Was looking for something to do on the weekend. Got connected through a hobby that I had back in Ontario of sailing on a specific type of boat.
Okay.
So Albert 30 Association in Ontario gave me a contact of a guy who owned an Albert 30 in Montreal. I went sailing with that gentleman, and on the boat met a man named Bob Baxter, who recommended that I apply to Bechtel in Montreal. So I applied for that job, and I always joke I got the job because I went sailing on the weekend.
Yeah.
Which it has been my experience that most, if not all, of my jobs have been through people that I've obtained or got. I've been through people that I know or contacts I have. I've applied to some jobs off of job boards and things like this, but it's never to any success. I'm sure it works for some people. For me, it's generally been, and perhaps a little less so now, but it's generally been people that I know have been the gateway. And certainly when I was starting out, I found that was the case. And I was living in Montreal and applying for numerous jobs. Wasn't getting a lot of success until I met Bob and got the in at Bechtel. Not that, of course, he put his finger on the scale or anything, but just getting the introduction really was at the time. So, yeah. So then worked Bechtel for 9 years, worked in Montreal for about 5, went to Saudi Arabia with them for 7 months. Got a call when I was standing in the desert and had been told that I wasn't going to be able to keep on to the project because at the time Stephen Harper was having an argument with the Saudis about visas. And so the Saudis decided that Canadians were going to take a very long time to have their visas renewed, and it didn't make sense as a site that somebody working on site to not be at site for 2 months. So they called me and said, "Would you like to go to China?" And I had been to China on one of the vacations off from site in Saudi. I was on an 8 and 2 rotation, so 8 weeks on, 2 weeks vacation. My brother was living in China, so I went to visit him for 2 weeks, not for 1 week. And so standing in the desert and being asked if I wanted to go to China, the answer was quite easy. So I went to China and lived there for 2 years, over to Kitimat, and then I was starting a family, and I felt like it was time to settle down, and so I had to resign from Bechtel. And through contacts I'd met working with Bechtel in Ontario, I was able to get the introduction I needed at the company I'm with now, which is Morrison Hershfield, and I have been there for 4 years.
Nice. So what would you consider your best quality that makes you good at what you do?
Interesting. It's a great question. So through the work I did with Bechtel, I was exposed to how big companies manage big projects and some of the common pitfalls and issues that happen, and it seems to be common to all projects. So at Morrison Hershfield in the project management group, what I do obviously is manage projects, but mostly what I consider my job to be is to help people talk to other people and make sure that they're talking to other people. Though I am a bit of an introvert, I find that my ability to talk with people and understand their issues and what they need, and then encourage that collaboration amongst team members has been really helpful to the success. Silos within projects is what creates a lot of problems, and so I consider that my sort of one of my main jobs. And also, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but because I've identified it as something that needs to happen, I focus on it and would consider that to be one of my stronger attributes.
So with your training, you'd say you learned that more than anything with all the training over the years, that's where you came to gain these skills?
Yeah. One of the things about Bechtel is that they don't do very much engineering in-house. And so we learned as engineers in that company to make sure people were working together and communicating. be fair, ever since high school, I've been, in group work projects. I've been the guy sort of leading the team, right? So I would always sort of take on that leadership role, and it's essentially continued through university and then into my current work. So yeah, it's been a life, in a way, a lifelong hobby.
Yeah. It's funny how it turns into that, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
how
not
is
even on purpose.
no, no, no. It's just you just keep doing it. It's like it works and you keep going with it. So how has COVID affected the work that you do?
Yeah. So obvious part, of course, is everything has gone to virtual,
Hmm.
and so everybody's from home, which is, I was actually Morse Initial is a pretty good company for that. I was their head office is in Markham, and they have a Burlington office, but I was already working 3 days from home before COVID. Now it's obviously 5 days from home.
Hmm.
Um, it at the For the projects that I was working on, really it just took the meetings from being in person to being online. A lot of the work was already being done in different offices.
Hmm.
So we were already having a fair number of teleconferences and virtual meetings and things like this. So it's just pushed it to 100% of that, and meant that we don't have to drive and sit in traffic, which is great. I'm not going to complain.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Working from home has been good for me. So is there something that, knowing what you know now, where you're at, is there something that you would tell your younger self if you had a chance? Some bit of advice that you might give yourself?
Interesting. Uh, let's see. So, I mean, my first thought was essentially to say yes to opportunities.
Hmm.
So, there's, well, I don't know whether it's true, but in a universal for everybody sense, but it feels like to an extent opportunities come along when they do, and being able to take the leap of faith and say yes has been very, let's say, powerful for my life.
Hmm.
Um, standing in the desert. Do you want to go to China? Yes, of course I do. And through that experience, I met my wife, and now have two beautiful children, and all of that. That being said, Monday I started a new company, and on that case, I essentially said no the first time that I spoke with them, because the timing wasn't quite right.
Hmm.
But I guess I said no in a nice enough way that now 2 years later, we reopened the conversation, and the timing is right this time, and so I'm making that switch. So, and it's again a leap of faith.
Of
The
course.
company I'm with, and Morse Inertial, it's comfortable. I know the people, I know the operations, I know how everything works, and so it's just a matter of doing the work. Um, but the new role is going to be different challenges and new people, and yeah, so I decided that now is the right time, and I'm taking that leap. So saying yes, but then also being aware that I suppose not always timing is going to be exactly right. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Maybe don't burn your bridges and, keep your options open sometimes.
Yes, that is a very important one. I through this process have heard some horror stories of how people have left jobs,
Hmm.
and I would say it's important to always be very respectful and very honest and open, and dealing with employers to say, here's where I'm at, here's why, and when it's done that way, I've always had employers say to me as I'm leaving, if you need to come back for whatever reason, just give us a ring. We'll make. if it works, we'll make it work, right? If it's the time is right and all that. So I've heard some horror stories of people who didn't do that, and it's
Oh yeah, making
discouraging.
an explosion.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
So
And you'd be surprised how many people end up going back to companies. I've seen it in the past where they've done some damage and they still end up going back, but that damage is never ever, it's never forgotten, I guess.
no, yeah.
So
And yeah, and I think it's hard too, right? Because it's easy to be in a feeling of the grass is greener on the other side of the fence type of situation, and sometimes you get there and realize, whoa,
yeah,
nope, made a mistake. And if you obviously left things nicely and can call people back and say, I made a mistake, do you mind? And
yep,
yep, you got a control Z on life.
yeah, exactly. So any advice that you would want to share with our guests that may be thinking of getting into your type of career?
Yes. So I suppose that my path to consulting engineering is a little bit circuitous. So I don't know that I have direct, like, you're a new grad, here's how you go about it type of advice. But that being said, um, it seems to me that the world of consulting engineering is getting your foot in the door, and whether that's through a small company where you are exposed to more facets of the business, or getting in at a big company where you see how big companies work, and some people complain about being a cog in, like, just a number. But big companies can be powerful, right? So in my life, the big company ended up sending me around the world, and I was able to live in places that not many people have the opportunity for. So both options are valid, and I can say from where I sit now that the big consulting firms need people who know how to do the engineering. And if you want to do the engineering and be the technical specialist, it's a totally valid career path to go and work at a smaller firm and really get that experience, hands-on, where you're running, you would be working through a lot of projects. Similarly, the big firms need people who are willing to do the technical work, just as they need people who are willing to do the oversight management type of work. So I suppose it would be a question of looking inside and trying to decide what you think is the most where your interests lie, and then choosing a path accordingly, and knowing that, of course, if it doesn't work out, you can change gears and switch. In my life, I've almost never done any hard engineering because it wasn't what Bechtel did and does. Really, they do, but not in the world that I was working in. And so it might be hard at my stage, 15 years in, to become a technical specialist. But to be fair, I like what I do, and it's what it's the roles that I enjoy, and so I'm going to keep on this path.
I guess it shows too a bit of like a diversity so you educated yourself in that, but it's not a streamlined job that you do. There's many facets that it can turn into wherever your education goes. It twists and turns, and it's not just one straight path. You take this, you get this degree, this diploma, and this is what it's going to turn into. It's never that straight line path. After you've gotten out of university or college, it's never really that straight path.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. It's interesting. Next month we'll be having our 15-year Zoom call with some friends from university, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the different careers that people have taken. I know for a fact one guy is a CEO and founder of a company in Vancouver. Someone else designs very, very, very high-tech carbon fiber catamarans down in California. Uh, those are just two off the top of my head, but the varied paths from folks who all went through the same engineering school and education, it's fascinating, and it largely. Oh, actually, I think I know someone as well. I think he was mechanical, maybe a year behind me. He works at, I think it's Lucid Motors, so he was on their battery development team, and he's worked on Formula E race car battery chart management systems or something like that. So, yeah, so that was a guy that loved cars, and he did mechanical engineering, and I think he was on the Formula SAE team, and now he works at a massive, fascinating, cutting edge car company in Lucid. So yeah, it's definitely the options once you do the education are virtually limitless.
I think that's the big reason why I have the guests on, because it's a personal career path and it's different for everyone. I can interview 10 people taking engineer education and where they go, and they all go somewhere different. That's what it is to just show the unique paths that people can get to from where they started. So it's different for everybody. Everyone is unique. So yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Anything else you want to share, Kevin? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. No, I would say, I don't know. I mean, careers is such an interesting thing, and work and what we do. I have two thoughts. One is related to work generically, and the other is, it's it's a bit of a I don't know what the word is. Anyway, and one of the jobs that I didn't mention that I worked when I was younger, I think it was Youth Employment Services that was being run out of the hall in Waterdown, possibly.
Okay.
When I was in high school, and I went and worked at a boat mechanics. He just had a shop in his backyard, and he was this anecdote's going to get a bit long. So anyway, and so he was just a boat mechanic, and it was great fun. I was his helper for the summer. He would take off during the day and do something, and I would take apart quads or take the lower ends off of inboard motors on boats, anything really. And I remember him telling me that when he graduated high school, I think he and some friends started a company building fences for the subdivisions. And anyone who knows Waterdown knows that there's approximately 1 million subdivisions. And I don't know if it was in Waterdown specifically, but basically he said he did really, really well for himself. And there was a time when he was driving, a brand new pickup truck with a brand new boat and brand new toys all over the place. Which is to say simply that a career doesn't have to necessarily also include university in order to be successful. I think that there is a need for trades and people who are you know are driven and motivated to do that work and be successful in that work. There's definitely opportunity there. And that summer I remember making fun of my brother. It's not a very nice thing to say, but my brother, because my hands every day were dirty and his hands were clean because he was working as an intern or co-op student at Garber Jones Hannum Architects in Hamilton, which then became Envisage and I think still is. Anyway, Graham now runs his own architecture firm in Hamilton, and I ironically sit behind a desk and have very, very clean hands. But paths not taken in this type of thing, right? But yeah, the point of that is simply that I did university, but I don't think that everybody needs to do it. I think that to an extent, too many people do it, and there's people who could succeed and be wildly successful in trades and maybe not do that engineering education or higher education. Opportunity there. And I every time I work on my house and solve a problem and do a little reno, I think, man, what if I'd just been a tradesperson? And, what would that life look like? Not that I'm going to go back, but yeah. So That's one thought. And the other story or thing I was going to mention is simply sort of more related to my current work, which is now obviously as a professional engineer, we have a code of conduct and ethics, and so it's very important that we behave and all of our work is done in accordance with that, which essentially just means pay attention, do good work, be honest, be open and transparent. But I think that what I have seen in the um, work in the world that I work in is sometimes folks not taking enough responsibility for the quality of their work.
Mhm.
And so for everybody, no matter what it is you do, I think it's important that um, you take some pride in the work, take some pride in doing the work well, and stretch yourself. Um, at Bechtel, a lot of the problems we ran into were when people did their work to the edge of the page, as I call it, and stopped. So if it was
Mhm.
somebody else's job, they didn't worry about it. But the number of times things would show up at site and be wrong because they didn't look over at somebody else's shoulder
Mhm.
was shocking. So I think there's the point of that story is simply, take some pride and some, try to go that extra mile to make sure that your work is of good quality. And I think that, you'd be rewarded in the long run. I think that to an extent, some of my so-called success in my career has been that I'm willing to, try that little bit more to make sure that things are good. Because there's nothing worse than putting out something that's got a mistake or a problem, and it comes back in the future. So
Mhm.
yeah,
It's very good advice. I think advice for any kind of position, any kind of job that you're doing. That's great advice. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, well,
great,
thank you
great.
so much, Kevin, for being a guest and sharing your journey. And I wish you luck on your next adventure.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it was fun. Little chat on a Wednesday afternoon. Good fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, and all the best to your family. And I hope I see you again soon in the community.
Yes, me too. Someday soon, I hope.
Okay, take
Thank you,
care.
Catherine. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.